Welcome to Midlife Matters. I'm Marie, and each week I'm joined by my friends Julie and Mindy to talk about all the topics keeping women in the middle years up at night. Listeners, today we're talking about shame and pessimism. Join us as we share how these two negative emotions make us hesitant to celebrate and keep us from experiencing joy. Let's get started. Listeners, today we're talking about shame and pessimism. Two lighthearted topics, right, Julie and Mindy? Shame and pessimism.
Ooh, so excited.
That makes everybody want to push play. But listeners, as always, we aim to explore these two topics. We're going to give you some things that we've learned, and then we're also going to try and leave you encouraged and with more tools than you had when you started. So definitely don't turn off the podcast just because shame and pessimism might not sound as exciting as some of our past episodes like fashion in midlife.
Right. And if you're like me, you can just sit here and think, oh yeah, I'm going to talk about somebody else because this isn't about me.
Right. Exactly. And as a springboard for this discussion, we're using the book, What If It's Wonderful by Nicole Zasowski. And this book is about learning to release your fears, choose joy, and find the courage to celebrate in the midst of fear and disappointment. The author is encouraging us to ask ourselves, what if it's wonderful? And we did an episode on the first two chapters of this book last month, and this month we're going to be doing chapters 3 and 4. But as always, you do not need to be reading the book. Don't turn off the episode because of the topic, and don't turn off the episode because you think, oh, I'm not reading the book, because you really do not need to be reading the book. That's just the way that we're coming at these topics.
Well, and if shame and pessimism sound kind of like discouraging topics, just remember the title. What if it's wonderful? Like that's where we're headed.
Right, right.
A good reminder,
such an
Julie.
encouraging title.
Yes, yes. And so last month in episode 197, we talked about the habit of practicing disappointment, which if you really think about that, listeners, I think that you'll kind of think to yourself, oh, that's more applicable than I might think. And now today we're going to be talking about the shadow of shame and protective pessimism. Her chapter titles really grab you.
Mm-hmm.
It's been enjoyable though, because even when I went in to read these, they're short. Like they're to the point. She makes great points and they are very applicable, but it's, the chapters are not very long. So it's a little more digestible, I guess.
Right, right. All right, well, let's start out with a little bit of background. Julie, do you want to fill us in as to where we are to this point?
All right. Nicole, the author, opens up with this story where she has hurt a friend, and then she asks her for forgiveness. And her friend is ready to forgive her, but Nicole says she can't forgive herself. And she said, as someone who struggles with perfectionism, she says it's really, she has a difficult time separating her identity from her mistakes. She was living with the idea that a perfect performance was the only way to remain significant and secure. She had trouble receiving the gift of forgiveness because she wasn't sure she deserved it. So here her friend is hugging her and is just ready to celebrate like a fresh start between the two of them. But Nicole wasn't able to move that quickly and easily into that repaired relationship because she just, I don't know, I guess she just didn't think she deserved it.
Yeah, I really identified with this story. I can think of several situations, over and over again in my life where maybe the circumstances or the relationship or whatever has happened is ready to move on, but I don't feel like I'm deserving of having it move on. Mm-hmm. Did you guys relate to this story at all?
I know I really do. And I have found through the years that the hardest person to forgive sometimes is yourself. Because we see our mistakes. We know our intentions. We know our motivations. We know our feelings. And even if you're faking it on the outside, like you might be feeling guilty about what you're feeling on the inside. But it's just really hard to give yourself forgiveness.
It is. Yeah. Well, how have your ideas about celebration or joy been shaped by what you earn or deserve? And I think that this is something that we really need to think about because when we first think about the question, I don't know that it's obvious. But I do think that a lot of times we feel like we have to earn or deserve our celebration before we're really able to feel joyful about it.
Yeah, I think I understand her uneasiness with feeling like she didn't deserve the forgiveness just yet, almost like she first had to prove herself or fix herself.
Mm-hmm.
And then they could celebrate, because you only feel good enough to celebrate when you can fix things. And I know sometimes I feel that way with God too. Like, I don't revel in the gift of his forgiveness because I don't feel deserving yet, because I'm not perfect yet. Like, I know I'm going to have to go and ask him again for the same forgiveness probably. And it makes me uneasy. Like, well, I'm not there yet. How could you forgive me?
Right.
So I think like that's what she was doing with her friend.
Mm-hmm. It seems like I take it back to when I was a child, and it's like a classic reward system. You do good, you get a sticker or, a cookie or extra playtime. You do bad, you're going to get a spanking, or timeout. And I feel like a lot of times if somebody doesn't make us suffer, we feel like we have to make ourselves suffer. Like we have somehow our suffering or inflicting pain in some form or fashion on ourselves makes us feel more like we deserve forgiveness because we've hurt. It's almost like you have to hurt over it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like serve your
time.
Your sentence. Yeah. Go to jail, and then when you get out, okay, well, now I've earned forgiveness. And it's totally messed up.
Yeah.
Because we can't earn forgiveness no matter how much pain or suffering that we inflict on ourselves or even other people.
Yeah. So forgiveness really is a gift that you just have to accept, because the friend, you could argue she had very legitimate reasons to be cautious with her now, or to hold back, but she didn't. She was just ready to forgive.
Right.
Yes.
Well, I think probably some of that performance-based system, that way that we feel like we have to earn our joy or celebration, I think it plays into what she points out, that most of us are quick to absorb criticism and slow to trust a compliment. And does this resonate with you? And I know that I've heard before that you have to have 5 positive things said for every negative thing in order to kind of balance it out. So like if you're thinking about parenting or somebody's job performance, I mean, that's kind of a high ratio. That's kind of hard to do all the time. But, I do think that the criticisms last so much longer in our mind.
Yeah, I loved her example of how she might actually receive the compliment in the moment, but on the drive home, she starts to kind of try to invalidate it. Like, well, what about this and this and this, And by the time she gets home, she's just focused on all the negatives and has totally forgotten the positive. And I love that there's actually scientific reasoning for this, though. She said studies have shown that our minds are like Velcro for the negative and Teflon for the positive. And that painful messages loiter longer in our brains than the truth does. So I guess that's why, Marie, like for every one negative, we need 5 positives, because that negative is going to stick around for a long time.
Right. It is. Yeah.
I think we're more apt to believe the negative because it's how we feel about ourselves. Like, I think we're probably our harshest critics, really. And so those negative feelings, like if we were to receive, it might make you mad if somebody criticizes you, but on the inside, you're like, yeah, I'm the worst, And then if somebody compliments you, it's just, it only lasts so long, or you don't believe them. And, it's just, sometimes you can tell if you can receive a compliment or if others can receive a compliment. But also you think about, raising kids in the same household, and you ask them their perspective of a family vacation, and one could have, all the things that went wrong perspective. One could have all the things that went right. I mean, you hope there's one kid that knows that there was something right, but I just feel like it is really easy when we look back on our own memories to let the negative overshadow the positive. And you really have to, like, it's hard to train yourself to see the good, to remember the good, and to remember that it wasn't all bad. Because even during hard seasons of suffering, there are things coming to my mind now that weren't there 3 or 4 years ago. And I'm like, oh, I'm so thankful for that. I couldn't see it at the time, but I'm having to fight for those. It's not just going to jump into my mind unless I go looking.
Right.
Yeah. She does talk about the difference. We didn't really mention this, but like, is it nature or nurture? Like, are we born that way or is it learned? Because I know my husband, I mean, he just remembers the good things.
I feel like,
and I'm always having to remind him, no, you forgot about this.
Uh-oh.
This was not good.
It's like, I chose to forget that.
I just don't even think he remembers them. I mean, I don't even know if it's a choice.
I do kind of think that can be a personality trait too.
Yeah.
But I also think it can be a learned behavior.
Yeah, it can be both.
Because
hopefully we're
know,
learning.
Yes, that's what we're trying here for, right?
I hope it's learned.
Because I know that there are years of my life where it was all bad. And then there were years of my life where even though there was still hard stuff, I had gratitude. And it's a heavy workout to develop that. But I do know, like, I've been working on it.
Well, Mindy, when I stayed with you and we did all of our walks where we tend to talk long and hard, I don't think you'll mind me sharing this. You said that when you look back in pictures at certain points of parenting and you were unhappy with yourself, you worry that that's all, that your kids can kind of remember that about you. And I said, I don't really remember that about you. Like, I think you look at the picture and know how you were feeling inside, but other people on the outside, that wasn't obvious. And so I do think that we tend to look back and think, oh, here's all those bad things, but really the people around us weren't even noticing, or maybe the good far outweighed the bad and they don't even remember the bad.
You're so right. And I can think of the seasons and the times and the ages of my children, and I was very unhappy and bitter and, angry and sad.
And a lot of it was probably internal. Only,
Yeah. And I do hope, I told Marie, I said, I hope, I don't feel like I was probably a very good wife or mom during that time, or friend.
No, you were. And I said, I don't really see you that way. And I don't think your family sees you that way either. I think it's just that, like what you said at the beginning, we all know ourselves so well. Yeah.
Yes.
The motivations, the heart behind it. Yeah.
Yes.
No, I never would remember you that way either.
Oh.
Yeah.
Whew. I don't know how. I have joked with people that I wouldn't have wanted to be my own friend. I mean,
see, we're hard on ourselves, Mindy. We're very hard on ourselves. Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Well, on a more lighthearted note, I think of this too when I think about compliments and criticism. And I've heard people say that they get annoyed with other people that can't take a compliment. So I try not to be that person. And it feels awkward to just say thank you when someone compliments you.
Right.
But it can be annoying when someone is trying to compliment somebody else and they just keep deflecting or bringing up all the bad things and they won't just say thank you.
Right.
Yeah.
Have you guys noticed that before, or heard that you should be okay with accepting a compliment?
Yes. And so I just try to say thank you and just leave it at that.
Right.
Okay. I'm in agreement with both of you guys. Did you guys have to learn how to say thank you? Because I feel like I did.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's an American thing, but it seems like the polite thing to do, and I put that in quotes, is to bring up all your mistakes. Or if even if someone simply compliments your outfit, oh, this old thing, I've had it forever. And actually, it has a stain here. And like we run it down and we never even get around to saying thank you.
Yeah, and what you're really communicating is, I don't deserve that. That's what you're saying. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, kind of as a byproduct of this, take a look at how you are at accepting a compliment. Can you just say thank you and move on? Or do you need to criticize yourself and basically criticize the other person for even thinking to compliment you?
Right. Well, it's one of those things that you notice, like your first reaction to things. You really shouldn't say your first reaction to most things, is what I'm noticing about myself. Like if I give myself a minute, I might respond a lot better, so I do try to kind of like pause. because I'm really cynical or negative or want to make, like it's just like that first reaction is not always good.
Right.
So even with like the compliment, if I could just pause, we can pause long enough to think, oh, they don't see that. Let it go.
Yeah. All right. Well, as you consider what Paul says, she talks about the Apostle Paul and his instruction to take every thought captive. What are some practical ways that we can fight for truth in our minds? Because I do think that a lot of this is a battle of the mind. Mm-hmm. It's not always obvious to everyone around us, but what could we do to be more successful with our thought process?
I love how she said you just have to work on making the truth more sticky. And, like how can we make the truth stick? And I love that she mentioned saying the truth out loud. And for me, that's where like worship music comes in. That's basically truth out loud.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And it sounds silly, like to be able to turn on a radio station and hear a song, but it can really totally change my mindset to hear truth and to actually say it. She said like saying it out loud just does something different in your brain than just thinking it. Mm-hmm. So singing along. And she mentions kind of like rehearsing or addressing your negative feelings before you're in that situation. Mm. And I have found that that's something I do afterwards, like, oh, if I've been hurt and I'm feeling these yucky feelings, then I go to the truth. Mm-hmm. Well, she said, try rehearsing. Like if you know you're going to be in that situation, apply that truth before you're there and kind of prepare yourself. Mm-hmm. I thought that was a really good, a good idea.
Yeah. And something that we might tell our kids, like practice the situation beforehand. Yeah. We, even as adults, need to do that.
Yeah. Right. I know practically this book is very timely, and I have been honest and really joked about how the holidays and, the whole season I said before, it kind of sucks the life out of me. Mm-hmm. But I do tend to have a little dread going into it, and I have no reason to.
Except past experience.
There's a few past experiences, but why would I let those rule the future? I have to actually think about like there are so many more seasons to come, and I don't want to always feel that dread or hesitancy about it. I want to expect it with joy, and so Bryce and I both October is crazy busy for our family, and there have been probably 4 times we've looked at each other and said, but what if it's wonderful? And we laugh. and it's actually been very healthy for us to do that, because we both are like, okay, like we've got this, but what if it's wonderful? And then it just kind of helps, one day at a time, one little season at a time. But also I am practically trying to know that replace truth with those feelings of dread for the seasons to come, because I want to enjoy them. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to look at that season with dread anymore. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of myself. I'm tired of the feelings. It weighs me down, and there's no reason for it. Like there's no reason that I should carry those heavy feelings. And so it just adds baggage to something that really is going to be great when it gets here. Mm-hmm. So why now am I dreading it?
It's kind of like Happy School. It taught us, like reframe those negative thoughts.
Yes. It's hard.
Right. Yeah. And address some of your pitfalls. I think a lot of it doesn't really have to do with the circumstances of the marathon holiday season. It has to do with the bone-weary tiredness. And so I think probably when year after year you get to the end and you're like, I am so tired. It's not really any circumstance. You just have this feeling of exhaustion. And so when that season comes up again, you are anticipating the exhaustion, but you can kind of name some of your pitfalls and say in advance, I'm going to make it easier on myself here, and I'm going to make it easier on myself there. And, I'm not going to allow myself to sink into that again,
Right. Yes.
Yeah. Well, Julie, you talked about like saying your truth out loud. And this is kind of the same, but a little bit of a twist. For me, it helps me if I can name the fear. Because a lot of times fear is very nebulous and like crowding out and using huge spaces in my mind. But if I just said the fear out loud, a lot of its power would be taken away. Or even better, if you tell the fear to someone that you love or trust. Because sometimes when we say a fear out loud to someone else, it diminishes it even more because we realize how it sounds out loud, or the other person says something that helps us to realize that that doesn't need to take up as much space as it's taking up. And it's really helpful. But if we keep it all locked up in our mind, it's just going to grow bigger and bigger.
Yeah. And she even says in the book, you can't change what you won't name. So she even said, name your wounds. Like, what are they? And I know, like, right now in our situation, there's a lot of really sticky negative feelings in my head, that are sticking there. So, like, if you know what they are, then you know what truths to apply to them. If you don't even know what they are, what truth are you going to hang on to, that kind of refutes that lie.
Right, right.
So I think that's why it's important.
Right. Naming your wounds sounds so, I don't want to say negative because obviously it does sound negative, but I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to mine the past and think of where I've been wounded. I mean, obviously those things come to mind, but I didn't want to like search them out. How did you feel about her asking us to do that?
Yeah, she even says most of you are going to want to skip this. She said that. Like,
but did you guys want to skip it? I guess that's what I'm asking. Like, did you want to skip it?
Yeah.
And did you skip it or did you name them?
No, I wrote them out in the margin. I was like, ooh, those are so ugly.
That's brave. You put it in the book?
Well, I'll have to burn the book, but
I was going to say, people will pick up my book and look at it like, I'm not writing anything.
That's why you have to write so messy that your kids are like, I can't read anything that you write.
Well,
good.
I can write it in cursive.
I can barely read it myself. So. When I wrote those out, it was like, wow, that's a lot to carry around.
Oh, mercy.
Right. Yeah. How'd you feel about that, Mindy?
It doesn't sound fun. I know that. Also, but it's one of those things that I think a little maturity is set in, and I know I could see the value of doing it. At the same time, I may never find a good time to sit down to do it. Like I could see myself avoiding the process. Like, yeah, I should do that. Oh, yeah, it's not a good time.
Right.
But yes, the value of it, though.
Yeah. If I'm not ready to do it now, maybe just be aware of when they pop up. I could say, oh, there's one.
I think there are times, it's like I journal every day. Sometimes it's a sentence that even doesn't get finished. And sometimes it's a couple pages. So I think having that in your mind to when the moment happens, to just be ready to give into it, because I have learned to try to not stuff my feelings. If there's something happening, at some point I need to name it. I need to bring it to the surface. Otherwise it does stay in that nebulous place that weighs you down constantly. And that weight, I'm tired of carrying it.
Well, and you might think, oh, it's just fear. That's so general. Fear of what? Like when I named mine were super specific. And then I actually thought, I've got to go and look for truths that apply to this, versus just some general, God loves me. Like, yeah, I know.
Right.
But what about this,
Okay.
And so that was helpful for me.
I can see how that would be helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. Since this chapter is about shame, we naturally have to think about Adam and Eve, because we know that like before the fall, which means before they sinned, the reflex was for them to worship and to adore and to obey God. But after the fall, the reflex was self-protection, self-celebration, and disobedience. And if you remember the story, once they sinned and they knew it, in their shame, they covered themselves with fig leaves because they knew they were naked. And so she, in the book, asks, what are some, quote, in quotes, fig leaves that we might use to hide? And she talks about 4 really common ones that come out in her therapy sessions. But she says we all hide. It's just a matter of how.
Right. And her most common ones, she said, were blame, shame, control, escape. And I felt like I do all of those, and kind of maybe even in that order. Like, first we want to blame someone else. It wasn't my fault. It wasn't me. I didn't do it. And then we're ashamed of our part in it. And then we try to take control of the situation. And then a lot of times, because I can't forgive myself for what I did, or I feel like maybe someone else can't forgive myself, I'll, in quotes, escape. I'll just avoid them. I'll avoid the situation. I don't want to be around that anymore because I don't really know where I don't know what the final solution has been. And I feel like, are they still mad? Are they not? Are we okay? Can I just go back to acting normal? Like, a lot of times we don't really know how to end it well.
Yeah. I also thought that the blame part could be blaming ourselves. Like, we get super self-critical, like, oh, it was, here I go again. It was all my fault. Like, like we could that could also be part of the blame.
Yeah. We're either blaming ourselves or we're blaming someone else. But
yeah.
We immediately start looking around for fault, whether it was our fault or someone else's. Yeah.
Right. Because we always feel like we have to assign fault to someone. It's just,
somebody's got to pay.
Somebody's got to pay. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's for them.
Well, how has shame shaped your relationship with God and other people? And I think that I alluded to this a little bit just a couple minutes ago. Shame can make me avoid God, and it can also make me avoid other people. Like, my natural inclination, I think, just like a small child, if they're ashamed of something, you might find them in a corner or in a closet playing quietly, or and you're like, what are you doing in here? And then you start looking around, you're like, okay, what do you not want me to find in this room?
Right.
What is off?
What'd you do?
Right.
Yeah, that's that fig leaf hiding in the corner.
Yes.
I know I tend to lean toward perfectionism and self-criticism, and I guess relating to other people, that's probably an attempt to criticize myself before somebody else can. And I also tend to withdraw or retreat, and that can cost me connection, and that can be with people or God. When it's with God, I tend to think, well, I don't deserve his grace, and I think it's human nature. We want to fix ourselves and earn our own way. But she reminds us, I loved this reference to Jesus's words when he said, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. It's easy and my burden is light." And, she said, shame is an ill-fitting yoke. Like, it was never meant to fix. It was never meant to save us. And we want to save ourselves. I mean, we do. We want to, it's just so easy. It just seems too easy to accept his forgiveness. Like, we need to do more.
Shame has definitely affected my relationship with God. And it's been more evident to me, again, one of those things that I have seen past seasons where I have allowed it to separate me from God and his love and his forgiveness. And I almost want to replace the word shame with the word pride, because I feel that they are synonymous here in the fact that sometimes our shame feels too great. And when we feel too great for God to forgive us, then how powerful really is God? And are we saying that we're more powerful? Yes. If we feel like we've done something that he can't forgive or that he can't love us, then we're replacing God with ourselves. And so in that instance, our pride and our shame is separating us from him. And that is just the age-old lie, isn't it? I mean,
yeah.
It's the place where God already paid the cost. Somebody has paid, and it was Jesus. We all said somebody has to take the blame or the fault or to suffer, and Jesus has done that. And so if we say his sacrifice wasn't good enough for me, we're saying, well, I'm too great for Jesus' sacrifice because I'm more important. And that is just the height of pride in and of itself when it separates us in that way.
I starred this little paragraph It says shame will never be an agent of restoration in relationships. It is tenacious in finding fault within and holds us to a different standard than other people in our lives. And going back to her example in the beginning where she didn't really want to accept her friend's forgiveness, she said, if I allowed shame to have its way, the cruel inner critic would have forced me to replay the conversation over and over again and threatened my connection with my friend. It may have even cost me the relationship. Mm-hmm. And so I need to be reminded of that, because if someone is forgiving you or they're not holding something against you, you don't need to keep holding it against yourself. I like that it is never, shame is never an agent of restoration. So shaming someone else isn't going to make them feel closer to you. And you feeling ashamed of something isn't going to make you feel closer to them.
Oh. Right. And her friend was so healthy. Like, did you guys feel that way? Okay, because I underlined the words that her friend used. She said, because the author was saying, like, I'm just the worst friend and all this stuff. And her friend said, you're not the worst. You made a mistake that hurt me. Mm-hmm. Like, she was
admitted that it hurt her.
Yeah, she said, yeah, you hurt me. Mm-hmm. It was a fact, but you're not the worst.
Right.
And I'm like, what a simple way to,
right.
To she named it, she dealt with it, and she let it go.
Because don't you think a lot of times when a friend asks us for forgiveness, we're like, oh, it's no big deal. And I think maybe that makes an apology or forgiveness harder to accept, because they haven't really owned that it did hurt them. Like, I think it's probably good that she was so honest that then she really did, because it did hurt, but she's what she's forgiving you of.
Right.
That was good for both of them.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's talk about protective pessimism. And Julie, why don't you let us know where we are starting, what the background is of this chapter?
If you remember at the end of our last podcast when we talked about chapters 1 and 2, chapter 2 ended with her looking at her positive pregnancy test. And I think it ended with, do I dare to celebrate? So now this chapter picks up. She's at her doctor's office with her husband, and she's getting an ultrasound. And this is a very familiar scenario for her. She's had a lot of ultrasounds. And she starts talking about big T traumas. And these are things like horrific events like a POW experience or severe child abuse or surviving a natural disaster. But she says there's also small T traumas, which can just be like a one-time event or a chronic pattern. And it might be less obvious, the destruction they cause or how damaging they are to your mind, but they are still traumatic. And for her, sitting in an exam room and looking at ultrasound screens kind of fell into that category. Those were little T traumas, because she said she had seen ultrasounds before, seen the baby, seen the heartbeat, and then with each appointment, the worst came to be, like no heartbeat. So that's kind of where we are.
Right. And so I think our natural inclination is to be pessimistic and cynical. I mean, I could totally see myself being her in the ultrasound. Like, I'm not even going to hope for a good outcome here. And I'm just already going to be telling myself, it's going to be bad. You're going to leave disappointed. Just don't even get your hopes up. I probably wouldn't have even told any of my family members that I was going for the ultrasound, because I like to have my disappointments alone.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, she definitely kept her expectations low. And she even said she rehearsed the disappointments in her mind, like to kind of guard against the pain. Like I'm not going to let this surprise me. I'm going to be ready. I'm going to be prepared.
It was interesting too, because she's watching the people that she's with in the room, and she's watching them joyfully celebrate, and she was like, but I've been disappointed later in the process before. And so knowing that she might face disappointment in the future, it was, it's difficult to celebrate.
Yeah, I loved her honesty when she said she had two thoughts in her mind. God is so amazing, but would he do amazing things for me? And her answer was probably not.
Right.
That was just a very honest answer. And that response grew out of like her past experiences. Like we talked about earlier, like, well, every other time it's turned out bad. So what's going to be different about this time,
Right.
Yeah, I like that she also said, I know that God is good, but I imagine that the good in my life would always look like broccoli on a dinner plate. Good for me, but never something I felt excited about.
Yeah.
And isn't that how we often view, like, okay, God's going to work it for my good, so it'll probably be beneficial, but I'm probably not going to like it.
Yep. That is,
yes.
That's always been my thought. I'm not going to like what he has for me. And then it's God is good and he has his good for me, but I'm not going to like the good.
Yeah. It's just like all the things that we grow up being told are good for us, but we don't like them. Like eating our vegetables and going to the doctor and doing our homework. Like it just falls into all those categories. Yeah. I know they're good, but I don't enjoy any of it.
Yeah. Not what I want.
Right. Yeah. So were you guys surprised to hear her say that joy is the most terrifying feeling we face as human beings? I think that's strong wording, but if you think about it, joy can be really scary. I think it's scary because as soon as I get what I've wanted, then I have the nagging dread of, well, what if I lose it?
Yeah, she said joy is, for most of us, is accompanied by a dread that it will be taken away. And I had trouble understanding this at first, so I went and listened to the talk that she gave credit to this concept to a psychologist, I think Brene Brown. And I went and watched her talk on YouTube, and she said, if you think this isn't true, if you're a parent, you will understand this. She said, you go in and you look at your sleeping child, and when they're asleep, the world is all good. Like you just have these wonderful, beautiful thoughts about them. But then out of nowhere, this fear comes in like, well, what if something bad's going to happen to them? You start envisioning, well, what if they get sick, or what if they get lost? Or what, and it's just totally irrational things. But I thought, oh, that is so true. That is such a good example. Now, and I think I always feel that way when things are the best. Like when things are going the best, then you realize it's like, then you have the most to lose.
Right.
I think that lack of joy, that fear of joy, really marked the season that I referenced in my own life earlier. The season where I was sad and angry and bitter. And I remember, and it came out of miscarriages, and it came out of, even when I got pregnant with Jacob, I mean, I have been there where what she was talking about. I just thought, well, I'm still never going to see him. God's going to take him later in the pregnancy. And I remember being so afraid through the entire pregnancy. And I developed terrible habits during that time. I mean, it marked my life and it changed me. This was neat when I read this about, we've all read about Abraham and Sarah, and when Sarah laughed when she was told she was going to have a baby, or she overheard that she was going to have a baby. And it's a laugh. This is how the author describes it. I'm just going to read it. It's a laugh that wants to hear the plan before she'll trust the promise, and she needs a guarantee before she's willing to embrace God's goodness. And I thought, yes, we all want that guarantee. Like, okay, yeah, that sounds great. Or it's good right now. Can you guarantee it's not going to be taken away? Can you guarantee there's not going to be something that hurts, later on? And so sometimes we think, well, is it okay to be joyful if it's just going to go away? And there was a time where I said, no, it's not worth it. Yeah. Well, now I've changed my mind. Praise the Lord. Yes, it's worth it. And yes, it's worth it to even have joy during suffering seasons. And I think that that's one of the closest, almost truest forms of joy, is when you're in a season of suffering and the Lord provides something for you.
Right.
I think that is one of the most beautiful times to see it fully in its face.
What you said just made me think of something I wanted to say back on the part about why we even use pessimism to try to protect ourselves, because it doesn't work. Like, preparing for the worst doesn't ever lessen the grief or the pain. Like, all it's done is prolonged it. And I know this in my head. It doesn't make it any easier not to do. But when you look back, it's really just prolonged it. You've missed out on the times that you could have been delighted or joyful or celebrating. And it kind of made me think about like when you hear parents maybe have put their child on medication for ADD or depression, and you think, oh, it works great because they don't feel those low lows anymore. But they also say they don't feel the highs. Like they feel flat, And I thought that's a perfect example of that. Like, I wonder if at the end of our life, kind of one of those deathbed experiences, if we'd wished we hadn't spent so much time guarding against grief, that we kept ourselves from the good things, the good feelings too.
Right. And this can be very simple. This can be a lot like more shallow than even like the big T traumas of our lives or harder seasons. This could be going to a Braves game, knowing you're going to miss sleep that night. Well, I would kind of dread like, oh, I'm going to be so tired. And, the traffic in Atlanta and, I got to get up early tomorrow. And so like you can focus on that.
Right.
And miss the game and miss the fun and miss, the experience and the time in the car because there is more traffic, Right. And so it's funny, like sometimes people say no when they should say yes. And you stop living when you start saying no more. You stop, you're like, no, because it's just too far. No, I'm going to miss sleep. No, it might rain. No, I'm going to be uncomfortable. Well, no, get over yourself. I'm telling myself this. Get uncomfortable.
Right.
Lose sleep. Get wet.
Right.
That makes me think of putting up Christmas decorations and thinking about taking them down.
Oh, yeah, I'm just going to have to take them down. Why would I put them up?
Yeah, or packing for a trip. I'm just going to have to unpack all this sometime, and wash it all. So funny. It's like, even though, I love to travel, but those thoughts do go through my mind. You're right, Mindy. It's like, oh, why am I thinking about that?
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, what do you think? I mean, are you guys trying to laugh with delight like Abraham instead of cynicism like Sarah? Because when I hear about Sarah laughing, I think, well, of course, she's old. She's past childbearing. Who wouldn't laugh? But the thing is she's not laughing with delight. She's laughing with, I don't believe you. And I guess I hadn't made that distinction very well. And I think a lot of times I need to focus on the delight more than the thing. Because there's always a downside to most everything, even the Braves game. Yeah, it's exciting to go, but the downside is I'm going to have to travel and I'm going to have to miss some sleep. And, there's most joyful events don't have just joyful things leading up or surrounding them. There's work that you have to put into everything.
Well, and every joyful event and feeling we have on this earth comes to an end. And there's even sadness in that. Like this moment is fleeting because it's really just a glimpse of heaven. Like joyful, good moments are glimpses of what we have prepared for us in eternity. And so there's always that. There's even in the most joyful of moments, there's always a hint of sadness because it's going to end. It can't last forever. And not that it takes over, but I mean, what I'm talking about. In the back of your mind, it's there. So yeah, with the Sarah story though, I've always had a little trouble with this story because I felt like Sarah had a promise from God. Like her disbelief was, I believe God, but I don't trust that he's actually going to follow through. And I think, oh, how could she do that? But we don't always have a guarantee from God. Like we have more than she had in that we have the full story of Jesus. But as far as, I don't know, like God hadn't come to me and said, John's going to be healed. In a year, he's going to be healed. I think, well, surely I could believe him if he told me that.
Well, she had visitors that said it. I mean, we know.
Yeah, no, but did she know they were? Maybe she didn't know.
Yeah, I don't think she totally knew that.
Yeah,
I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's always easier to say that another person should believe something. Then you should believe it.
Yeah.
It's always harder to believe good things for ourselves than it is for us to believe good things for other people. And I don't know why that is. I guess that makes us need community because we can encourage each other and lift each other up when our friends aren't believing good things for themselves. We can help them believe good things for themselves. And then they can do the same for us.
Well, and I think what that story is telling us, like, God wants us to be expectant of him and things he's about to do, possibilities, not guaranteed, not specific. Yeah.
Because the guarantee, though, is him. Right. That's the only guarantee. And even with parenting my children, I wish I could guarantee, future achievements with their performance or behavior or whatever, but I cannot. I can't even promise that I will be there for them the rest of their lives. I can't guarantee anything. And so the one thing that I feel like if I can somehow show them that I'm trusting and leaning on God, because he's it, like he's the one thing that is never going to change while we're here on this earth. And if somehow I can give that to my children, then I'll feel like that's what I have been called to do as their mom.
Yeah, and that's really good. That's true. That the gift, the possibility, the miracle is him in all of this, not what we can get out of him. I thought this was really good when God promised Abraham, all of the land. He took him up to a point and said, as far as you can see, to the north, the south, the east, and the west, this is all going to be yours, and your descendants will outnumber the sands in the desert and the stars in the sky. And this was years before this really happened. Like Abraham didn't even have a child, and they were old, and that caused them to laugh. So, but God asked him to physically walk the outer boundaries of this land. That was one day going to all be his. And he asked him to do this, while it was still looking impossible, as far as Abraham was concerned. And she asked what the purpose was of this physical experience. Like, why did he actually have to walk it? And I had to read this many times to get it. And I think it was to show Abraham, like, what was to come, like, to be expectant, to embrace it, to it was a way of him to, like, imagine the reality that was yet to come. And she pointed out later on that, like, when we want to change our thinking, it takes more than just, like, new knowledge. We have to do something kind of to experience it. Like the physical act and the thoughts connect something in our brains. So I think that made more sense then.
Yeah. Kind of putting your actions behind your words, or actions behind your thoughts, or something to cement it in your mind.
Well, also, like, I feel that God was, like you said, Julie, and I'll just say it in another way that's practical for me, that he wasn't living for the here and now at all. Everything was something that he would never see, actually. But isn't that what we're called to do as believers? We're supposed to be living for heaven, if I could put it that way. Seeing or trying to understand that even in the midst of what we're going through right now, we cannot see the big picture. Only God can see the big picture. And so if somehow we can train our minds in truth to know that God loves us, he does see the whole picture. We may not understand what's happening to us right now, but if we can somehow get to the outside, and something that he will work to his glory and our good later, then we can have hope for today.
Kind of plays into the ending of the chapter, because as the chapter ends, Nicole and her husband leave the appointment with good news and ultrasound photos in hand. And you can just imagine her, like, she's probably walking out gingerly, like, I want to hope. I have these pictures. I'm also have a little bit of trepidation, but she has booked future appointments. Her husband is laughing in delighted disbelief, and she was able to borrow a little courage from him to walk the outer boundary of the gift God had just given them. And walking the outer boundary of that gift, I think, would be sharing the photos with her family, maybe starting to think about a nursery or starting to plan or think about this baby, because walking the outer boundaries would be allowing yourself to even imagine yourself in the land,
Right. Yeah. Imagining that reality that's yet to come. And yeah. And she talked about just another physical way to do this that's really simple. And I liked the connection was like, if you're fearful, you might pray standing with both feet firmly planted on the ground, like to give you courage. Or like if you're struggling with doubt, just praying with your hands open, not in fist, gripped tight, but open, palms up, like in a posture to receive. Like God wants us to be expectant of what he's about to do, what he's going to do, and to be looking for it. And so just having that physical posture of receiving, like with your hands open, not closed. Or if you're praying in humility, face down on the floor, like somehow the physical movement makes a connection in your brain.
And then I truly appreciate, she said, borrowing a little courage. And so that is, again, another just encouragement to surround yourself with people that, have wisdom and truth in their lives, because sometimes we really need them to remind us.
Right. All right. Well, I think that this book is delving into so much, and we have so much to learn. And so, listeners, I know that some of you are reading the book along with us because we've heard from you. It's not too late. If you want to read the book, go ahead and order What If It's Wonderful and read along with us. Like I said, you can go back to episode 197 where we did the first 2 chapters, and now we just finished chapters 3 and 4, but they're short. You could easily catch up. But even if you're not reading the book, hopefully you are gleaning some wisdom from these concepts that she's talking about, and hopefully we're all growing together. Come and find us on Instagram at Midlife Matters Podcast, or email us at midlifematterspodcast@gmail.com if you have anything related to this that you want to share with us, because we'd love to hear from you. But before we go, we want to do I'm a Fan. All right, Mindy, what are you a fan of this week?
All right, I'm going to really lighten us up here.
Okay.
All right, and I'm going to try to help you save a little money when you're going to Target.
Okay, great.
I found this like by mistake. Since I don't live in town with a Target, I thought that I was going to have to order something. So I got on the app and I was like trying to look for it. And then I found this thing under the Target Circle offers. There are some same day deals.
Oh.
So like if you go to the Target Circle offers and then you scroll down, a lot of times you'll see, it's not showing today, but a lot of times it'll say like today deals. And it's not a Target Circle offer. It's if you order it that day and are going to go to the store and pick it up that day, you can save money by ordering it through the Circle app.
Oh, neat.
And I was like, well, dude, okay.
And then you don't have to search for it. It's waiting there at the counter.
Oh, you go to customer service, you have saved money on it, and they hand you your stuff. So
it's a win-win.
And there was extra money off. Like I was buying cereal and Tide and, like a couple of just normal things. And I was stunned that they had these same day deals.
Oh, that's great.
I was like, okay, I need to remember to look at that.
Interesting.
I need to explore.
I've always
Target
been a little
Circle
confused
more.
by that app.
Yeah, I'm confused by Target Circle, and I can never remember what phone number I set it up under, or whatever. But I need to look into it more.
Like spend a little time with it, because something else you can do that I just found is I earn rewards by buying things at Ulta.
Oh.
And you can link your Ulta rewards with the Target Circle app now.
Oh.
So even if you buy something from Target, now I'm getting my rewards points at Ulta at the same time.
Well, our Target, I think, just opened up an Ulta section.
What?
Am I imagining that, Julie? I feel like somebody was...
Sephora.
Oh,
I can't remember.
I don't know. I just remember thinking, I wouldn't even need to go to the store anymore. I could just go here to Target to get it.
Yeah, it looks like the Sephora makeup store in there.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised, because when it actually prompted me, do you want to link your Ulta rewards with Target?
They must be in partnership together.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
so
neat.
That must be, but I'm completely thrilled about that.
Yeah, that's really good. Very good. All right, Julie, what are you a fan of this week?
All right. Yeah, I am super excited about this.
Really? Ooh. I can't imagine what it would
y'all
be.
Are going to laugh. You're going to laugh so hard.
Let's hear it.
This really proves I'm entrenched in midlife because I'm excited about a mop.
Oh, really?
Okay, I have fallen in love with every mop I've ever bought and then been heartbroken by it.
Really?
Because
I've never fallen in love with a mop even one time.
Well, I fell in love with the idea and then quickly was heartbroken by it because I think I started off early on with those sponges that you wring the little.
Oh, yes, I had those.
And then I think one time I tried a string mop and I thought I never want to touch that dirty water again.
Why would people ever love string mops?
And it just moves it around. Yeah, that's just gross. And then I finally settled on the Swiffer Wet,
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And I was out of those pads, so I went to Target to buy. I actually gave David my mop, so I had to buy a whole new system.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And I had seen that O-Cedar Easy Ring spin mop on Instagram, and I've seen a lot of reviews, people talking about it. So I thought I'm going to give this a try, and I used it yesterday, and it's like miracle.
Really?
Because, and this is the cool part, it has a divided system. You keep the dirty water separate from the clean, and it does it automatically. I can't even explain how it does it. And you have this little foot pedal that spins the mop, so it does it like, those salad spinners?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I loved my salad spinner. It works just like that. So, because I'm using this on hardwood, and you can't use a lot of water on hardwood.
Sure.
So you can get the mop almost dry.
Really?
And they recommended only using water. So that's what I did the first time.
I only use water on my hardwoods.
Mm-hmm. Well, then the pure joy comes in when you open that bucket and pour out. The water was black.
Oh, that's a good feeling.
It was black. And, I thought with my Swiffer, I changed the little pad, but is it really? I think it would always be black. I think I could mop every hour and the Swiffer pad would be black.
Yeah.
Because it's not really getting it. So the floor looks great.
Oh, well, awesome. Goodness. All right. So it's the O-Cedar spinning mop.
O-Cedar Easy Ring Spin Mop Bucket System. Because I think they have two. This is their newest one. It's like $35. Okay. Target had an entire row of them.
Oh, all right. Well, we will definitely put a link in our show notes, and I bet a lot of people are looking for a new mop.
Yeah.
Wow. I can't wait.
It's really cool.
All right. I am a fan of some glasses that you drink out of. So, Julie, it's funny that you just mentioned that you gave your mop to David because David just moved out of the house. So I just had a son that moved into an apartment at college. And so, of course, you can get rid of it's not even like they were old or damaged, but you can just get rid of things that you're tired of in your kitchen. You can give to your kids, then you get yourself something new. So if that is the season of life you are in, and I just thought, you know what? I've bought the same kind of glasses for years and years. I'm going to branch out and get something new. So I like depression glass, and I've collected a lot of pink depression glass over the years. But my daughter already had the pink depression glasses that I'm showing you. So I thought, well, I'm going to get the green ones. So I'll show them to you.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah. So they're like a pale green, and they have some different designs on them. And I liked them, too, because they're a full 16 ounces. So they're a nice large glass. They're very heavy. Not too heavy to pick up, obviously, but you don't feel like you're going to break them just by washing them. Yeah, so I found them on Amazon. They're called the Bormioli. I'm probably massacring that name. The Bormioli Rocco Romantic Cooler Glass. And you can get a set of 4. And the regular price is $30. But like I've said before with Amazon, for stuff like this, I wouldn't hesitate to get the pre-owned. It's mostly just someone opened the box, didn't like it, and sent it back. And the pre-owned is only $25. And you can still mail it back if you don't like it. Anyways, I am enjoying these glasses. My kids, when they've come over to use them, are like, oh, Mom, you got new glasses? I like these glasses. I'm getting compliments on them. So anyways, if you're giving your stuff away to your college kids and young adults, you are allowed to replace your stuff with something new.
Right.
Oh, my goodness. That is so great. And then use it every day so you feel,
Well, especially if you're giving things to a boy, because he couldn't have cared less what the glasses looked like. The girls might have had more of an opinion, but seriously, whatever I give a boy, they're like, that's fine, I'll take it.
Right.
All right. Well, Julie and Mindy, I enjoyed this discussion. Listeners, we hope that you enjoyed this discussion, and I look forward to talking with you next week.
Talk to y'all next week.
Bye. All right, bye. We're so happy you joined us today. You can find the show notes for this episode at midlifematterspodcast.com. Also, please tell a friend about the show and help them hit the free subscribe button on their favorite podcast app. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Midlife Matters Podcast. That's where we post pictures and stories about all the things we talk about in each episode. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.